The galaxy was never silent. Across the stars, every empire whispered, every ruler shared secrets behind closed doors, and every soldier carried stories of battles too strange to believe. But there was one whisper louder than all the others. It was not about strange alien beasts, not about the rise of new weapons, not even about the collapse of old powers. It was about one species, one name that carried both fear and respect: humanity. The humans had not been in the stars for long, and yet their reputation spread faster than any fleet. To most species, humans were considered dangerous even when unarmed. They adapted to poison worlds, fought on frozen ice planets, survived in deserts where no water existed, and built homes on mountains where even oxygen was thin. The galaxy called them stubborn, reckless, even insane. But when they saw humans in war, the whispers turned to fear. Alien captains would share warnings to their young soldiers. "If you meet a human soldier," they said, "never assume they are weak. Even if wounded, even if outnumbered, they will fight until they can no longer breathe." And this was not an exaggeration. Entire alien armies learned this the hard way. What made it worse was that the humans never sent their best at first. What the galaxy faced in countless battles were only their regular soldiers, the ordinary troops. The ones humanity called the Standard Army. But what the galaxy called them was something else. They called them storms. A storm of flesh and steel, of willpower that refused to bend. Aliens saw humans fight without food for days, moving as one body, one mind. They saw humans improvise weapons from the wreckage of their ships. They saw them fight in toxic air, in crushing gravity, in darkness where no other army would dare to enter. And when victory seemed impossible, humans would laugh, push forward, and win. For alien leaders, it was unexplainable. For alien soldiers, it was terrifying. In the great archives of the Galactic Empire, one general recorded his words before his defeat. "We did not face warriors. We faced a force of nature." That was the galaxy's understanding of humanity's regular forces. Just the regulars, and even that was enough to shake empires. But then something strange began to spread. Not from official channels, not from great battles, but from the shadows of broken wars. Survivors whispered of something worse. A new kind of human soldier, far beyond the regulars. They spoke of shadows moving in silence, of fleets destroyed without warning, of fortresses found empty without a single shot fired. They spoke of a unit so terrifying that the galaxy prayed it was only a myth. Humans called them special forces. At first, the galaxy laughed. How could anything be worse than what they already faced? How could humans create something more dangerous than their ordinary soldiers? But the laughter never lasted long, because stories kept coming. One tale came from the Irix Confederation. They sent their fleet to occupy a human outpost on Uom, the edge of known space. 3 days later, no signal returned. When a rescue party arrived, they found only empty ships drifting in silence. No crew, no signs of battle, no survivors. The logs showed nothing but static. The name of the attackers? Unknown. But the whisper grew. Special forces. Another tale came from the Drell Union. A warlord built a fortress armed with the strongest shields known in the quadrant. He filled it with his best mercenaries, creatures bred only for violence. Yet when merchants passed by months later, they found the fortress doors sealed from inside, no damage outside, but every single soldier gone. The halls were empty, weapons still loaded, food still fresh. What happened inside remained a mystery. But in the records of frightened survivors, one explanation appeared again. Humans had sent their shadows. These stories were dismissed by many as rumors. But rumors had power, and in the galaxy the fear of something unseen was worse than the fear of something known. If humans already terrified their enemies with the regular army, what would happen if this hidden force was real? In the halls of the Grand Dominion, alien rulers held secret meetings. Their fleets were massive, their weapons unmatched, their confidence unbroken. Yet even they whispered the same question. What if the humans are hiding more? For them, the unknown was a greater threat than any fleet they could see. And among the galaxy's common people, fear took another form. They imagined shadows walking unseen in their cities. They dreamed of silent footsteps in the night, of doors opening by themselves, of soldiers who never left tracks. The galaxy feared the regular human army, yes, but now they feared the myth of something beyond that army, a myth that carried a name, Special Forces. What the galaxy did not know, however, was that the myth was not entirely a lie. Somewhere deep in human space, far from the eyes of alien spies, there existed training grounds no outsider had ever seen. Camps where humans pushed themselves beyond breaking. Places where silence was a weapon, and fear was taught to be ignored. The galaxy was right to be afraid. Because if the day came when humanity unleashed these shadows, history itself would burn. And so the whispers continued. Across stations, across fleets, across the very halls of alien kings. They asked the same question again and again. If the regulars are this terrifying, what happens when the special forces arrive? That question alone was enough to keep empires awake at night. The galaxy had seen countless wars. Empires rose and fell, fleets burned, planets were conquered, and armies clashed on 1,000 worlds. Yet no army in history had ever earned the kind of reputation that humanity's regular soldiers carried. They were not elite, not special, not chosen. They were simply called the regulars. But to the galaxy, they were already a nightmare. It started during the first human expansion wars. The Caliph Dominion sent 500,000 troops to occupy a human colony on the edge of the Perseus Arm. By numbers, the humans were hopelessly outmatched. They had only a small garrison of a few thousand men and women. Any other species would have surrendered without firing a shot. But when the Caliph army landed, they did not find civilians kneeling. They found humans waiting, digging trenches, setting traps, and preparing for a fight they could not win. For weeks, the small human force held back wave after wave. Even when their weapons ran low, they used knives, rocks, even their bare hands. They fought in fire, in smoke, in rubble. They never stopped. The Caliph commanders could not understand it. To them, war was a matter of numbers and technology. To humans, war was survival. And survival was something they had perfected across centuries on Earth. The Caliph eventually won the colony, but their victory tasted like ash. Out of 500,000 troops, nearly half never returned. The survivors did not celebrate. Instead, they spoke with horror. "They are not soldiers," one Caliph officer reported. "They are monsters wearing human skin." From that day, the legend of the human regulars spread, but the galaxy would soon see more. In the Battle of Orion's Gate, the Syraxis Combine launched a massive assault. Their war beasts, towering creatures bred for combat, stormed through human defenses. Any other army would have fled. Humans did not. They stood in formation, shoulder to shoulder, even as the beasts crushed the ground around them. When their lines broke, they did not run. They regrouped and charged forward with screams that chilled the Syraxis soldiers to the core. What shocked the Syraxis most was not the weapons humans carried, but the way they fought when weapons failed. They turned shattered rifles into clubs. They sharpened scraps of metal into blades. They even used the bones of fallen comrades as tools of survival. To the Syraxis, this was madness. To humans, it was simply the will to live. And in the end, the Syraxis did not break the humans. The humans broke them. Again and again, this pattern repeated. Humans were outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched in nearly every way. Yet time after time, the regulars held the line. They adapted to alien worlds that were toxic to breathe. They endured burning deserts, freezing tundras, and crushing seas. They marched on broken legs, fought through poison wounds, and survived conditions that should have killed them long before battle even began. Entire alien species began to study them. The Vayari tried to copy human training methods, but their soldiers broke under the strain. The Draal attempted to mimic human tactics, but their armies lacked the madness of improvisation that made humans so dangerous. No matter how many times Alien empires tried to understand them, they failed. Because humans were not predictable, they did not fight like machines. They fought like storms. One alien historian put it best: facing humans is like fighting the universe itself. You may slow them, you may wound them, but you will never stop them. To make matters worse, humans were not simply fighters. They were builders. If they landed on a barren world with nothing but their packs, they would build shelters, weapons, and defenses within hours. In the middle of war, they constructed supply chains out of wreckage, communication lines from broken parts, and even medical systems from scraps. To humans, every problem was a puzzle. To aliens, it was sorcery. The galaxy had seen armies of power before. Massive fleets of machines, legions of genetically engineered soldiers, armies of beasts bred only for combat. But all of those relied on resources, fuel, and control. Humans, however, needed nothing. Drop them anywhere and they would survive. Drop them in war and they would win. That was why the galaxy already feared the regulars. They were not elite. They were not special. They were simply ordinary humans in uniform. Yet their endurance was extraordinary, their courage unshakable, and their madness terrifying. Empires began to plan entire strategies around avoiding them. Some even signed treaties just to prevent facing them again. But still, one question lingered. If the regular human army, the so-called ordinary soldiers, were already this unstoppable, what then of the ones humans called special forces? That thought kept alien leaders awake at night. The galaxy had seen what the storm could do. Now they wondered if something even darker hid behind the storm, waiting to be unleashed. And that fear was enough to silence entire councils. The galaxy knew one truth now. Facing humans meant pain, defeat, and humiliation. Facing their regular army was already a death sentence, but in the back of every alien mind the rumor grew louder. The regulars were terrifying, yes. But the shadows beyond them, those might be the end of everything. The galaxy thought it, had already seen the worst of humanity. The regular soldiers were more than enough to haunt every empire. Yet in the quiet corners of the stars, in broken taverns on mining colonies, and in the hushed voices of alien veterans, another story was whispered, a story of something worse, something unseen. They spoke of humans who did not march in formation, humans who did not announce their arrival with drums of war. Instead, these shadows slipped into enemy lines without a sound. When they left, there was only silence and ruins. At first, no one believed such tales. How could anything be worse than the storm of the regular army? How could shadows be stronger than thunder? But the stories refused to die. Survivors carried them like curses. Fleets vanished without firing a shot. Fortresses remained standing but empty inside. Entire command structures collapsed overnight, always with the same explanation: the humans had sent their special forces. The first great tale came from the Lernak Dominion. They had seized a human trade station at the edge of neutral space. Thousands of guards stood watch, shields activated, weapons ready. For a time, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the guards stopped reporting. Patrols went missing. The control tower fell silent. By the third night, the station went dark. When Lernak reinforcements arrived, they found only bodies, every guard gone, every officer dead. Yet the systems were untouched, the walls unbroken, and the doors sealed. No sign of battle, no sound of gunfire, only silence. The conclusion spread like fire. Special forces had been there. Another story came from the Makari war fleets. They had cornered a small human convoy near a dying star. Victory was certain, but in the middle of the night cycle, their command ship exploded from the inside. No fleet weapons had fired. No missiles had struck. Yet the flagship's core went critical, wiping out half the fleet in the blast. Survivors swore they had seen shadows moving in the dark before the explosion. Shadows that wore no armor, carried no banners, but left only destruction behind. The galaxy's leaders tried to deny these rumors. They told themselves it was propaganda. They told their people that humans were exaggerating. But the more they denied, the more the stories grew. And deep inside, Even the bravest commanders knew the truth. The humans were not only storms, they were also ghosts. For the first time, empires began to fear not just war, but silence. Because silence meant the special forces were already near. Whispers spread of their training. No one outside humanity had seen it, but the rumors painted terrifying pictures. They said humans dropped their recruits into frozen wastelands and left them for months with nothing but a knife. They said humans trained in poisonous jungles where every step was death, and only the strongest returned alive. They said humans were taught not just to fight, but to disappear, to become invisible even when standing in front of their enemy. The galaxy wondered what kind of madness could shape such warriors, but they did not understand humanity's truth. These were not monsters. They were ordinary men and women, made extraordinary through will, through pain, through endless discipline. They carried no magic, no alien technology, no genetic design. They carried only themselves, and that was enough to terrify the stars. One alien scholar described it best. We fear armies because we see them. We fear humans because we cannot stop them. But these we fear because we cannot even find them. For the galaxy, that was the most chilling part. You could fight the human regulars. You might lose, but at least you would see them coming. The special forces? You never saw them. You only realized they were there after it was already over. The more these shadows struck, the more empires began to collapse from the inside. Generals refused to take command, afraid they would be targeted. Soldiers mutinied at the thought of fighting an invisible enemy. Even mighty fleets hesitated to approach human borders. The fear of the unknown was stronger than the memory of defeat. And yet to humans themselves there was nothing mysterious. They did not call these warriors ghosts. They did not worship them. They simply called them by their name, special forces. To them, it was not about fear, it was about duty. These men and women were trained for the hardest missions, for the impossible tasks, for the wars that could not be won by numbers alone. They were not legends, they were tools, and humanity was very careful when to use them. But the galaxy did not know this. For the galaxy, every shadow was a nightmare, every silence was a warning, and every rumor was enough to start panic. By the time the first great war between humans and the Dominion reached its peak, the special forces were no longer a myth. They were a terror written into history. Entire fleets turned away when they heard whispers of their presence. Entire cities surrendered before the first shot, fearing the shadows had already slipped inside their walls. The galaxy had feared the human storm. But now it learned to fear the quiet even more. And in the silence between wars, rulers asked themselves a question that had no answer. If humanity can unleash such shadows only when they choose, what will happen if one day they decide to send them everywhere? The galaxy had no answer. But deep down, every empire knew the truth. If that day came, history itself would be erased. The Dominion was the largest empire the galaxy had ever known. Its fleet stretched across hundreds of systems. Its armies numbered in the billions. It had crushed dozens of species into submission, and now it turned its eyes toward Earth. To the Dominion, humanity was just another upstart race that needed to be broken. They had heard the stories of human regulars, but they dismissed them as exaggerations. Numbers, they believed, would always win. So they came. A fleet larger than anything humanity had ever faced. A sea of warships blotted out the stars above Earth's colonies. The Dominion declared that resistance was useless, that surrender was the only choice. But humanity did not surrender. The regular armies stood ready, soldiers in their armored ranks, fleets forming defensive lines. When the Dominion attacked, the storm was unleashed once again. For days, the battle raged across the void. Human ships fought with a fury no machine could calculate. Infantry units dug into ruined worlds and refused to be moved. The Dominion expected an easy victory, but what they found was a wall of fire and steel. Entire Dominion legions shattered against the human lines. Generals shouted, fleets screamed for retreat, but still they pushed, wave after wave, desperate to crush Earth. Then the Dominion revealed its secret weapon, a massive flagship, larger than any city, carrying weapons that could burn continents in a single strike. They aimed it at Earth's colonies, ready to erase them from history. The human regulars fought desperately to hold the line, but the Dominion's weapon was too powerful. A single strike could end millions of lives. That was the moment humanity made its choice. It was time to release the shadows. No announcement was made, no warning given. One moment the Dominion fleet pressed forward, the next, silence fell on their command channels. Their flagship's shields flickered, its weapons failed, its systems died one by one. Confusion spread. Alarms blared. Generals shouted in panic. And then, darkness. When the Dominion tried to respond, they found their admirals gone. Their communication officers were missing, their reactors sabotaged. The most powerful ship in the galaxy was suddenly crippled from the inside. The Dominion did not understand what was happening. Their fleets had not been attacked by ships or armies. They were being killed from within. That was the first time the galaxy witnessed humanity's special forces openly. Dozens of shadow teams had infiltrated the Dominion fleet long before the battle began. They had moved silently, unseen, waiting for the moment to strike. Now, in perfect coordination, they crippled the enemy's heart. The Dominion's flagship exploded in a burst of fire that lit the stars, taking half the fleet with it. Across the battlefield, chaos spread. Dominion soldiers lost contact with their commanders. Ships collided as navigation failed. Ammunition stores ignited. Generals screamed for control, but control was already gone. On the ground, Dominion forces faced their own nightmare. Fortresses that had been secure suddenly fell silent. Commanders were found dead in their bunkers, their guards never noticing who had slipped past them. Weapon stockpiles detonated in the night, taking entire divisions with them. It was not a battle anymore. It was a ghost war. The regular human armies pushed forward, their morale blazing like fire. For them, the shadows were not myths. They were allies. They knew that somewhere unseen, special forces were clearing the path, cutting the enemy's heart before the regulars struck. And with every step, the Dominion crumbled. The galaxy watched in shock. The mightiest empire, one that had ruled for centuries, was being torn apart not by fleets of equal size, not by armies of greater number, but by shadows. For the first time, the galaxy saw that the rumors were true. The special forces were real. And they were unstoppable. One Dominion survivor later described it in trembling words. "We were not defeated by men. We were erased by shadows. We never saw their faces. We never heard their voices. They were already inside us, waiting." The war ended not with a grand surrender, but with silence. Dominion fleets retreated, their empire fractured, their rulers slain. Humanity stood victorious. The regulars had held the line, but it was the special forces that broke the enemy's will. From that day on, no one doubted the stories. No one laughed at the whispers. Every empire, every fleet, every soldier understood a single truth. When humanity sent its regular army, defeat was likely. But when humanity sent its special forces, defeat was certain. The galaxy had seen its first true test of fire, and it had failed. But the most frightening part was yet to come. Because the galaxy realized humanity had not used all of its shadows, what had been shown was only a fraction. And if a fraction could destroy the Dominion, what could the full force of these shadows do? The galaxy did not want to know. The war with the Dominion ended, but its echoes did not fade. Across the galaxy, leaders spoke less loudly. Fleets that once marched proudly now hesitated before moving. Armies that had crushed entire civilizations began to second-guess every command. The Dominion had been the greatest empire of the stars, and yet it had been broken, not by numbers, not by stronger weapons, but by shadows. Humanity's special forces had stepped out of rumor and into history. In council chambers, alien rulers whispered to one another, "If the Dominion could fall, so could we." For centuries, they had lived by the rule of strength. Bigger fleets, larger armies, stronger weapons. Humanity had shattered that belief. They had shown that wars were not won by size, but by will, cunning, and silence. But perhaps the most terrifying truth was not what humanity had done, but what it had chosen not to do. The galaxy realized the special forces had been used sparingly. They had struck only key targets, only moments where the war could shift. They had not unleashed their full strength. If just a handful of human shadows could erase fleets and topple, commanders, what would happen if Earth ever sent them in full numbers? No empire wanted to imagine the answer. Veterans told stories in dark taverns, their voices trembling. One alien captain claimed he had watched his entire bridge crew vanish. Within minutes, though the doors never opened. Another swore that a shadow whispered in his ear before his ship exploded. Were these stories true? No one knew. But it did not matter. Fear had become stronger than fact. The galaxy now lived with a new kind of dread. Before, they feared the storm of the human regulars, the unstoppable tide of soldiers who fought until their last breath. But now they feared the silence. Silence meant special forces. Silence meant death unseen. Silence meant the end had already come. On neutral worlds, children of other species whispered human names as if they were curses. In the military academies of alien empires, young officers were warned never to underestimate humans. And in the private meetings of rulers, maps of human space were drawn in red ink, not as territory, but as warning. The strangest part was how humans themselves spoke of it. To humanity, there was nothing mystical about their special forces. They were simply soldiers with harder training, sharper discipline, and a willingness to do the impossible. Humans did not call them ghosts or demons. They called them brothers, sisters, sons, daughters. They were family. And that was the deepest terror of all, for humans did not see monsters. They saw only their own people, doing what needed to be done. This difference in perspective confused and terrified the galaxy. To aliens, such soldiers were legends, nightmares, gods of war. To humans, they were just our special forces. That casual dismissal shook every empire. If this was only special to humans, what else did they still keep hidden? And so, humanity stood at the edge of a new age. They had not sought to rule the galaxy nor to enslave it. They had fought only to survive. Yet survival had made them more feared than any conqueror. The galaxy no longer plotted against them openly. Too many wondered if the shadows were already listening. One line became a quiet saying among alien diplomats, a truth repeated behind closed doors. Do not fight humanity. Do not even think of it. Because the regulars will break you, and the shadows will erase you. The galaxy had learned its lesson, but humanity? Humanity marched forward as if nothing had changed. Their fleets rebuilt, their colonies thrived, their regular soldiers trained for the next challenge. And far away, hidden, in forests, deserts, and steel bunkers, the special forces trained in silence, always ready, always waiting. The war was over, but the legacy remained. The galaxy had faced the storm and survived, but it could never forget the shadows. And in the quiet of the stars, when fleets drifted alone and worlds trembled in the night, rulers whispered the same question again and again. If the regulars were already terrifying, and the special forces were worse, what comes after them? No one dared to answer, because deep down every empire already knew. Humanity was not finished. Humanity was only beginning.